Meeting. Has everyone read them?
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
We have approved the minutes. Next, we have public comments. I assume that's Jermaine. Is that right?
No, it's anybody in the audience that want to talk.
Anybody in the audience? Okay.
Janice Gooden, representing Caleb. Although my comments today are not necessarily those of Caleb, it's more so reflections on my part of being a part of the process with the CBA negotiations. I was looking back at the timeline, and Caleb was invited into this process in August of 2022 to facilitate the CBA. So we were able to form a coalition of partners that included South Chattanooga Community Association, a number of others, Green Spaces, the Iron Workers, Mary Walker Towers, Bethlehem Center, I guess in all about 10 organizations. We developed a negotiating team, and we were able to lay the groundwork for the CBA. We did get into negotiations. So a lot can happen in 2 years. So we see, administrations change, leadership changes, but we're happy to have been a part of laying the framework for this, and we hope for the success for the completion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, the next on the agenda is the resolution authorizing the chair or vice chair to execute a development agreement with U.S. Pipe and Wheel and Foundry site for the development of the new multi-use stadium. Jermaine?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jermaine Freeman from the Mayor's Office with the City of Chattanooga. We do have some slides that we'd like to show today, and I will be joined and co-presenting with Mark Mamontov, who is serving as our TIF and bond counsel. And so I guess all of you can see the slides on your screens at this point. Is that right? Okay, good deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you the update that we provided to the City Council and the County Commission, and then I'm going to provide you some additional updates because we had some important votes that happened this week with the Chattanooga City Council and the Hamilton County Commission. So you all may remember that when we started this process 2 years ago, the financing structure for this was very different from where we have arrived at today. And so you all may remember that in late February, the City Council and the County Commission both took votes to approve of an MOU that was sort of capture the spirit of a new financing structure that was agreed to between the city and county. And so that financing structure is what is represented on your screen today. And so it is the $80 million in publicly issued bonds that the Sports Authority would be asked to issue, along with $26 million of tax increment notes issued by the city's IDB for subordinate TIFs that would be backstopped by the city's property tax increment. And that's $10 million for perimeter properties and $16 million for the Chattanooga Lookouts. We estimated about $1 million of interest earnings on proceeds from the bonds, $3 million capital contribution from the Lookouts, and then $5 million in additional debt issued by the Sports Authority to also be paid by the city's incremental property tax revenues, but backstopped by hotel motel taxes and local option sales tax from the city. And we'll spend a little bit more time today talking about that $5 million of subordinated debt. But what you see on the slide in front of you represents the financing structure that has been agreed to by the city and the county to this point. And then in addition, we also have these additional sources of revenue. So we have the special sales tax allocation that was created under state law to allow the sales taxes that are generated from events inside the stadium to be used towards debt service. We also have rent from the baseball team of $1 million per year, which we'll also talk about a little bit today as we get into our lease discussion. And then we have, as I mentioned, previously mentioned, the property tax increment revenues for the bonds and any shortfalls in property tax increment being backstopped by the city and county. And so just to kind of go back through time, on February 27th and February 28th, the Chattanooga City Council and the Hamilton County Commission both voted to approve of that MOU to reflect the financing structure that you've just seen on your screens. On March the 14th, you all as a board, as a body, also voted to approve of that same MOU. On March the 25th, there was a special called meeting of the city's industrial development board and the county's industrial development board, in which they held a combined meeting, which is extremely rare, in which they basically said, okay, based on what we've seen in this MOU, we will now offer an amendment to each of our economic impact plans to represent the financing structure that is reflected in the MOU. Both industrial development boards voted to advance that amendment back to the city council and county commission for final consideration. And so that amendment would permit the issuance of that additional $5 million of debt by the Sports Authority that's payable by city tax increment and hotel motel taxes and local option sales tax. The amendment would permit the excess tax increment revenues that are not needed to service the bonds to be used to pay debt service on the $26 million of subordinate financing. And the amendment will provide clarification as to the percentage withheld by the city. And so earlier this week, this past Tuesday, 2 days ago, the Chattanooga City Council voted to approve the amendment to their economic impact plan. Yesterday, the county commission also voted to approve their amendment to their economic impact plan. And the city council, for their part, did clarify the amount that would be reserved for debt service, which they captured at a 25% of the available property tax increment that would be captured for debt service for the city throughout the term of the TIF. Now that those votes have taken place, what we are seeing now is sort of a change in this process and sort of an orienting of the process so that most of the next several steps will be carried out by this body. Okay, the city council and the county commission, for their parts, they, for the most part, have done everything that they need to do. And so from here on out, most of the agreements that will be coming before that will need to be executed, those agreements will be agreements with you all as the City County Sports Authority to sort of see this transaction through to groundbreaking. And then of course, just like our existing sports authority with the city governs AT&T Field, this body will of course govern and oversee the new stadium for the foreseeable future. So I think that's important for us to notate, is that the votes this week basically represent a pivot point in this process, in that now most everything else will be coming before this body, and there are very few additional votes that are needed by the county commission and city council. And so with that, I want to talk a little bit about the development agreement, so I'll ask Mark to come up to talk a little bit about the development agreement that you all are being asked to vote on today. We shared that with you about a week and a half ago, and so I'll ask Mark to come up to take us through that. Mark.
Thank you, Jermaine. It's good to see you again. I don't know if y'all noticed, but we got this so practiced that I arrived right when he that uses my name. So we've worked on this, 2 years now, Jermaine. So the development agreement will not be signed likely until the rest of the documents, but we thought it was really important to go ahead and bring this in front of you because we feel like we have, this was what City Council and County Commission saw. And this is a pivotal document in terms of getting comfort that the area around the stadium will not just sit there as a brownfield, it will be developed. And so we wanted to go ahead and bring this to you to get your take on it, and hopefully your approval that you're satisfied with what we came up with, because it certainly took several months to work through a very difficult agreement. And not so much that the the negotiations were contentious. It's just very hard to settle on something that worked for both sides from an economic perspective. So these are the highlights, obviously, of the agreement. To me, the first bullet point is a very critical one. I think that everyone's been very excited about the involvement of New City Properties out of Atlanta and Nashville, who have shown a real alacrity for developing properties that already includes historical industrial type buildings. They obviously, Jim Irwin personally was involved in the redevelopment of the Ponce Market, and in his earlier years, and then with New City Properties has been involved in a number of the buildings around it. And then they are leading the charge, or really the main developer of a beautiful site in Nashville along the river called Neuhoff, which was a former meat packaging plant, where they have integrated key aspects of the meat packaging plant into the development. I actually was over in Nashville, which is where our firm is headquartered, and I took the time to go see it because I was curious to sort of see their handiwork, and it's really amazing what they've done. So I think, I know the county was very interested, and I know the city was very interested in seeing a real commitment on their part, that they weren't just, and they never were this way, but just sort of looking at the deal and wanted to see a real financial commitment. So they're committed to go ahead and acquire the first main piece of property that surrounds the stadium. It's essentially an L-shaped property that on which the first two buildings, which are currently projected to be an office building with parking, and then some multifamily housing. So those would be like essentially right next to the stadium, and they're going to go ahead and close the same day we would, or before, close the bond financing, so we know this will happen, the acquisition of that property. It's a several $1 million commitment. I mean, it's, and so it shows a significant financial commitment on the part of the master developer, that they are in Chattanooga and they're ready to really start focusing their financial resources on making this happen. Once they acquire the property, there's milestones in the agreement that they are required to hit, to finish with schematic drawings, design drawings, construction drawings, the typical steps you take in a construction process, and we expect them to be under construction within a year, so they would be overlapping with construction during the stadium, which will hopefully, now the goal would be to open in the spring of 2026. So then there's some general requirements about development that our friends at Perimeter, and is the way I call them, but they have several entities, but that the entity that you see the development agreement is as a corporation that they're forming to do some really business planning purposes, estate planning type stuff. But those are really the Perimeter guys, and they are committing to use their best efforts to cause the entire U.S. Pipe, Wheel, and Foundry site to develop. And it's very hard. That was a lot of the challenge that we face is how do you quantify that and how do you do that? And so on top of that, we have milestones for development based on either acreage developed or square footage density development that they have to meet in order to show that they are commercially using their best efforts to move forward. And so there's a 3-year look and an 8-year look after the stadium is opened. And so, I'm sorry, 5 and 8, I said 3, 5 and 8 year looks after the stadium is open to make sure they're meeting these thresholds. And so, and those thresholds you probably saw them if you skimmed over the agreement, are built into the agreement. Those are somewhat tied to the projections they gave us on which the Younger report is based, to create the tax increment revenues to estimate the tax increment revenues of the site. They're basically based on the sort of the worst case scenario that is what's needed to basically cash flow the site to be realistic and conservative. So, what happens if they miss these targets? This is along with the commitment when folks ask me, what's the real I hate to say pain that they will feel if they don't miss this. One is, Jim Irwin will spend several $1 million on a piece of property if it's not developed, he's wasted several $1 million. This is the other real pain item, is that what we really felt concerned about as we were negotiating this is that did not want the increment. I mean, the South Broad District is going to boom. We all believe that. At least I hope you all believe that, or we wouldn't be doing this. But a lot of development will occur along the main South Broad corridor, not just on this side. So what we don't want happening is the increment from that basically subsidizing this, the Wheel and Foundry U.S. pipe site. We want it to develop, and we want them to have an incentive to develop. As you all know, the perimeter is basically going to be putting $10 million into this project through a TIF that basically, if they don't develop their own site, they are going to get haircutted by how much they get paid back on that TIF. In sort of plain English, if they don't meet those targets on an average basis, they will get haircutted. Theoretically, if they never build a single building in that site, they'd be putting at risk $10 million. That won't happen. We all know they're going to do that. But is it a meaningful? They could seriously lose, as my mathematical example in my puny spreadsheet shows, they could lose a couple of $1 million. I mean, in a sort of slow development scenario. So this is a meaningful thing. I don't think we'll ever need to use this. I hope we never. I think they'll blow right through this, but this gives them a real financial incentive to do that. It's really important to know, and I spoke a little bit with Ms. Madison yesterday about this. She had a number of excellent questions, as she always does about these sort of things. And the development commitments, things that are subject to excusable delay. Excusable delay is broader than force majeure. It's broader than pandemics and things like that. I want to make sure you'll understand that. It's like if interest rates, and we think they're actually going in the right direction, but at least they stayed level recently. But if we have something terrible happen and interest rates double, there's no way they can finance these things, and they need protection for that. So they have excusable market conditions kind of delay. What's important to note, though, is that does not affect their obligation to buy this first property, and it does not affect this what I don't want to call a clawback, but what people are characterizing at this concept of they could lose portion of the increment. So in other words, if they miss these deadlines, they can't say, oh, market conditions kept us from doing this. There's real teeth to these penalties. And so I think that's important to recognize. We also have if they don't develop, other than the site right next to it, which we're counting on New City, and they're already going to move forward with it. If they don't develop the rest of the site that's sort of north of, I can't remember the name of the street, but basically the site closer to the interstate, which is a big site, we would have an option through our IDB to basically say, look, you ain't getting this done. We're going to go and buy it. We have a right to buy it at 83% of the value. You might say, where did that number come from? Negotiations, basically. We had to settle on 83, but it's a significant discount from fair market value based on MIA appraisal so that we could step in, buy those properties, and try to redevelop them ourselves instead of waiting for them to do it. Again, do I think this will ever happen? No, they have every incentive to develop it, but this gives us some protection in case the property's just sitting there. And what happens, in addition to the remedies I talked to, we have the right to enforce all of this by specific performance. In other words, Phil doesn't have enough lawsuits, and so he could bring a lawsuit to enforce all this. And so thanks. He's smiling at me because I know how busy he is. I hate to even bother him. But those are the key elements of this. I know I went into a lot of detail, but I think it's a key agreement. And I want to make sure you all, as the community representatives and who care about the development around this, understand what we've got. I feel that was this where I feel it was a reasonable compromise that both sides gave a lot to try to reach a reasonable compromise that serves the community. So I'm excited, hopefully, to move forward. We had good votes over this week. It's my third meeting here this week, and we're excited that we're moving forward.
You're good.
Yeah.
And then, we'll make sure to get to questions here in a moment, but just for upcoming actions, so you all will be asked to review and consider some additional agreements. Of course, today we have a discussion of the lease that's on our agenda for today. The site donation agreement will come before you, as well as the bond indenture for the bond issuance. And then, of course, we're going to spend some time talking today about the issuance of an RFP for the $5 million of subordinated debt. The site donation agreement is going to have some exhibits to it related to site preparation, parking, and public infrastructure. the community benefits agreement that one of our community members spoke about so elegantly here a few minutes ago. The South Chattanooga Community Association and the Bethlehem Center are driving that process forward and working directly with Perimeter Properties and the Lookouts to execute. And then the city's IDB will review and consider subordinate TIF loan agreements for the Lookouts and Perimeter Properties. And we are pushing for a groundbreaking ceremony in July. And so with that, does anyone have any questions?
I have,
Go ahead.
the 25% that the city reserves, and it says specifically debt service, that's city's general, any city debt service, it's just not related to this project, right?
I'm sorry, so,
There's 25% reserve of the TIF dollars
right,
for the city, is that correct?
that's correct,
And it says for debt service on your presentation.
yes.
Is it limited to debt service? And it is just city's debt service, right?
Now, it is just the city's debt
City
service.
general, not IDB, not Sports Authority?
Correct,
just
not,
city.
yes, it is specifically for the city.
Yeah.
And so with traditional TIFs, usually the city holds back, I think, about 40%. And so that 40% is typically, can be used by the city for debt service as well as essential services as well as administrative costs. The 25% would be allowable for the same thing.
Okay,
Yes,
so it's not limited to debt service,
correct.
okay?
Any other questions from the board?
I just wanted to confirm, like, all parties involved have agreed to this development agreement?
This is a great question. So technically, the city council and the county commission don't vote on the development agreement because they are not party to it. However, when they voted for the amendments to the economic impact plan this week, they made it, both bodies made it clear that they wanted to have access to the development agreement so that they could see the development agreement as they cast their votes on the economic impact plan amendments. So both parties, both the city council and county commission have had access to the development agreement, and both bodies are aware of the development agreement. We shared the document with them as we shared the supporting documentation for the economic impact plan amendments.
Okay. And that was prior to their vote?
That was prior to their vote, that is correct.
Jermaine, I think it's important that this agreement will be between the Sports Authority here and the Foundry master owner, because it involves property outside the area that will actually be property that is owned by the Sports Authority during the term of this operation. Sports Authority will actually own the property that the stadium is on.
Correct.
But this involves development around that area. So that's part of the agreement.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
I'm not sure.
You want
Are
to?
you seeing me? I'm not sure I can put the.
You push that button?
I did, it goes on and off.
Well, I don't know why it does that, David.
I'm sorry. If the site owner decides that, and this is just, I think the agreement is fine, and thank you all for your discussions on it yesterday. But if the site owner doesn't come through, they buy that property and don't develop it, it's their property. They don't get this little, from their perspective, this little tip dollar. They own this property now. The cities, so that does, to some extent, impacts the area and the city's economic expectations for that area if they did develop it, right?
Correct.
They will have that right.
Yes.
So it will have a negative, beyond that $2 million, which would not be generated probably anyway if the development doesn't happen.
Correct.
So I guess that is the real
Incentive.
risk, I would think.
Yes.
But they don't want to buy property that they're not going to use.
Correct. And so that is correct. And so they own all of that property today. But New City Properties would purchase parcels that are directly adjacent to the stadium. And so, yes, if those parcels are not developed, then they would not be reimbursed on their TIF. And remember, and this is the important thing to note is that their TIF dollars are being used to improve a piece of property for the Sports Authority's benefit for the stadium. So their TIF dollars are not being used like a traditional TIF to go into public infrastructure to support private development, which is what a typical TIF does. It is being used to improve a piece of property that you will own for the stadium development itself.
One other thing.
Yes,
Well, does the TIF dollars projection anticipate that development?
yes,
Okay.
It does.
So then the TIF dollars will be impacted by that, so they wouldn't be available anyway.
correct.
To the same extent, some will, I'm sure. Okay, just clarification. I'm good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And those parcels of land that she's speaking to, that is where the IDB can come back and purchase it at 83% of market value though, correct? So
Yes.
at a certain time threshold, if performance wasn't done, they would come in, buy it, and then develop it themselves.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
correct.
Anything else?
This authority does have the right under this agreement to pursue the remedies section on here as well, because it is the
Yes.
party to the agreement. In the event that there is an issue by the site owner here that is not in compliance with that, then this body would be able to institute some sort of action to try to enforce that, as well as the IDB on its remedies that are provided for in the agreement. So two different bodies that I represent get to get involved with matters if we have problems.
That's all we have for this. I believe we have a resolution associated with the presentation.
Right. Phil, what do we need to do here on this?
Well, this one is actually a resolution authorizing someone to execute this agreement on behalf of the Sports Authority. And so as vice chair or chair, they would need to have a motion to authorize you to sign off on this agreement if that's to be done today.
Okay. Do I have a,
Motion.
motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we be authorized to sign off on this resolution to execute this development agreement.
Second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passed.
Unanimously.
Unanimously, yes. All right. Anything else on the agenda today we need to discuss?
Yes, sir. The next agenda item, I believe, on there is another resolution on the subordinate financing.
This is to issue a request for, you're talking about number 5 here, right? A resolution to issue a request for proposal, the $5 million subordinate financing of the new multi-use stadium. Do we have a motion to pass this?
Well, you need to get a presentation first and we'll see where we're going. I think Mr.
Really? We
Mamon.
gotta do that?
Yes, sir,
Okay, go
let's do
ahead.
that. Mr. Mamon.
I'll try to be shorter on this one, but if you all may remember that one of the log jams, we were basically $5 million short in funding for this project after everything that we did. And that $5 million, the city has agreed, the mayor's administration has agreed to support the payment of that. The $80 million debt is backed by both the city and the county. This $5 million would only be backed by the city and from their hotel motel tax revenue stream. It will likely, not likely, based on recommendations from PFM, who is financial advisor, municipal advisor, as Ms. Madison well knows, to the city and the county, they have recommended that we not, because of the unique nature and the small size of this, that we not include this as part of the bigger $80 million bond issue, that we seek proposals, likely bank financing to this $5 million. It will be strong credit. The hotel motel tax revenue stream is very strong. And, but it would be inappropriate for us to seek proposals without asking you all to, because certainly some banker could call you guys and say, hey, I hear you'll have an RFP on the street, which would be totally inappropriate. You're not binding yourself to anything. We're just going to go out and try to get interest rates for you all so we know, because that will be, this $5 million will need to close the same time as the $80 million bond. So we need to get this in the queue. So that's what the purpose of this resolution is.
And Mark, for purposes of my hat that I'm wearing at this point in time, this
Yes.
is to be done by city tax increment and city hotel motel taxes and would not be an obligation of this body.
That, well, it's like many, like IDB stuff, Phil, they will be the issuer of the debt, but it will not be backed by any resources other than what you just described.
Okay, sir. And that's based upon the agreements that we've had with both the county and the city.
It is definitely based on those. They approved the plan. We have to go back to, as Jermaine said earlier, I think we are, which is not a problem. I think we've had our last vote, hopefully from county commission, that they're satisfied. We will have to have one more vote from city council on that agreement, just to firm that up. And then obviously we have the votes with IDB, and then we obviously will have, I'm sorry guys, we'll have numerous votes from you all over the next couple of months.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think, Phil asked my question, but clarification, the city and county has authorized use of hotel motel tax.
The counties is not involved in this 5 million, just the city. They have approved an MOU, Ms. Madison, where they approved this. The actual agreement that binds them is what we need to bring back to them.
Okay.
So it's only city.
It's only, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
It's only the city that is. And this works well within the use of the hotel motel tax, given its current and existing outstanding debt, right? To which it's pledged. I'm sure PFM.
I think so. We've looked at the existing pledges, and it's very minimal, if any. I think we determined whether, we may have a small amount still pledged toward the Chattanooga project, but it's very small, and that the coverage is, would be very, very high, like 5 to 1 or something. So we believe this would be a very strong credit.
And this will qualify under the tourism concerns that are out there currently in state legislation.
Yes, I think so. I know Jermaine looked at this as well, and I think that the administration is comfortable. I mean, I can tell you that a number of other stadium-type facilities across this is a common source of paying debt service on similar stadii, is that a word, or stadiums? So.
I mean, it's an obvious a good use of dollars. Maybe that's a question just a general question for your bond attorney, in addition to PFM, because the hotel motel tax did have covenants and pledges for that revenue. I think it's good. I just, from a legal perspective, we just want to make sure.
Yeah, and I don't mean to dodge that we haven't looked at it in our roles, helping Vicki and Javid as well, Ms. Madison, so we believe it is, and I can certainly write you something up confirming
No, I
that.
don't mean you, I mean our bond attorney.
Yeah, well, I am now serving as bond attorney for Chattanooga too, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay,
Yes.
then scratch that question.
yes, think so.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Yeah, sounded immodest to say, that's me, I think so.
When you were using words like I believe.
Yeah, see,
Okay.
yeah, so sorry about that.
Sorry.
As long as you include that as part of your opinion.
Yes, we'll have to be honest, yes.
All right, good.
All right, so we need to pass this resolution, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
All in favor? Passes unanimously then. Oh, man. Next is update on the status of the lease agreement with Chattanooga Lookouts.
Sorry, I'm back again. There'll be some key documents coming to you along with the development agreement. One will be the donation agreement. And one of y'all asked a very good question, a lot of good questions, but why are the Sports Authority a party to the agreement, the development agreement, and not the IDB or something like that? Well, they're donating this property to you all. You don't want to be located there. You don't want to even accept that property unless you have a commitment for the area to be developed around it. So that's all intertwined with the donation agreement. It is in pretty good shape. We're, I would say, I don't want to say quibbling, but we're still dealing with environmental issues. We feel like they're adequately being dealt with, and it's more working through the wording. There's a good brownfield voluntary agreement on that entire site that the state has approved. It's signed, sealed, delivered, but we just want to make sure we get our ducks in a row on that. So you'll be seeing that. It's a relatively short agreement. Obviously, it's agreement to donate the property, but that's what, it's totally intertwined with the development agreement you just saw. Then we have the parking agreement that we're working through. Again, I feel like we're making really good progress. They have the locations for the parking. We just got to work through some details on once those initial parking lots become absolutely right for development with some beautiful new building. We want to make sure that we can move parking around and it works for the team, it works for the site owner, and it works for the city and this body, the Sports Authority. But the other key document, obviously, is the lease itself, and Jermaine told me no more than 5 slides, and so we have 5 slides about the lease to brief you guys, just remind you on what are tentatively the current terms of it, because we will be sending that out to you all shortly by email. Just waiting on a little bit of input from Jason, and he and I have been going back a little bit, and we'll get this out to you guys. Just a reminder, this is a 30-year lease. It will commence, the 30 years starts when the stadium opens, tentatively, not tentatively, 2026, probably somewhere in February to April before the first minor league game of the 2026 season. And MLB knows that. The team, and I know Rich could address it, but they're having to make some improvements at existing AT&T Field to deal for player reasons, but so they'll be there one more year, and then we'll be hopefully having a grand opening in 2026, a 30-year term. Any renewals are not, they don't have an option to just say we're renewing it. If at the end of 30 years, sit down, let's see if it still makes sense. And so that's the key. The rent, $1 million a year, 1.5% increase a year starting in the second full year. Those rent increases, which obviously you can do the math, would go into the capital improvements fund. So we're only counting on using $1 million toward debt service, with the difference going into a rainy day fund to pay for capital improvements at the stadium to supplement what the city and county have already agreed to put in that fund in the original interlocal agreement. Because obviously you want to keep the stadium up and have a source of revenue to do that. That increase will go away, though what was negotiated by our good friend Brent when he first started on this is that increase will go away once there's essentially adequate cash flow from the rent, the sales tax revenues from the stadium, which we get to use, including the state portion, and the tax increment revenues from the South Broad District to pay debt service. So once we're ahead on debt service from a community perspective, then that increase goes away. So I know you will get a lot of questions like, okay, who schedules the stadium tonight? It's there. We've leased it to them. Just like if you lease an apartment to somebody, they get to live there. Well, that's their home, and they will be scheduling. They will be doing concerts and karaoke night, right, Rich? And you all can participate and things like that. So they will be doing all the scheduling. The lease does require them to take into account the community, have diverse programming, and you may say, what is our role once the stadium is up and going? This is a big part of your role. They're going to come to you and say, here's what we're programming. Are you happy with what we're doing? Does this mesh with the community? Because this is a multi-use stadium. Obviously, you're going to have a good number of minor league games there, but this stadium will be designed for much broader uses and has a lot more space for things. And I've been amazed hearing what they do up in Fort Wayne. It's Jason owns the team there, and it's just a wide variety of civic type meetings and things like that. So they'll be coming to you all, and you'll be monitoring that they're running the stadium in the best interests of not only themselves, but the community There are 8 days, up to 8 days a year reserved for civic events. So for example, if the city wanted to hold, or the county wanted to hold a Memorial Day celebration there with fireworks, things like that, assuming there's not a game there that night, obviously, then they can say, Rich, we'd like to have the stadium that night. And I'm sure Rich will work with them to do that. Sorry to use your example, but you're handy. And then one thing that I think is very attractive about these stadiums, as I've learned about them, is that it's essentially, and this is how they run, Jason runs it in Fort Wayne, and this is how it's going to be run in Knoxville, is it's essentially like a public park during the daytime. Like if it's a rainy day and you want to get your laps in around and not have to go out to Hamilton Place Mall, then you can do your laps around the stadium if you live downtown. And so it'll be covered essentially, it's about, what, a quarter of a mile roughly to walk the stadium. So you basically have a track around the stadium that will be open during the day. If you want to go catch your lunch and picnic at one of the, the publicly available picnic tables, it's available. So it's going to be a public amenity when not used for events. And so that's another important part of the lease. They pay all operating expenses, all maintenance expenses, like when the toilet breaks, they're fixing it. We don't have to mess with that. You don't have to be out there with your wrench. It's all on them. So they will be maintaining it, they will be paying the utilities, they'll be paying just basically no cost to you guys. Now, large capital improvements, when we need a new roof, that's what we're saving up for in that. There's a very complicated section in the lease dealing with how to prioritize capital improvements, who decides what capital improvements are needed. You'll have a rolling 5-year capital improvement budget. This will be where you all, again, will have an ongoing role in maintaining and deciding what should be approved, not approved, and working with the team to make sure the stadium stays in first-rate condition and something your community continues to be proud of.
Should we hold our questions to the end?
What's that?
Do we hold our questions until the?
Oh, go ahead. No.
If you go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
Okay. And on another slide, you said that the stadium will not pay any lease rentals once the TIF and maybe other sources of revenue are adequate to cover debt service. Is that correct?
I did not speak clearly enough. The $1 million, they will always pay at least $1 million. And then, so what is 1.5% is $15,000. So I am confident, say in year 2, their rent's going to go up by $15,000. So then it'll be $1,015,000. Then it'll go up roughly another $15,000. The earliest we probably would break even is 3 years. So the rent will go up probably at least to $1,030,000 or $1,045,000 or something like that. It will never go back down. They will always pay at least that amount of rent. The million is there plus whatever increment they get for 30 years.
Okay. I misunderstood.
Yeah, sorry, that was confusing on my part.
Because I was
Yes.
into the last bullet on that page.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure Jason would love that, but I think no. So, but no, he's on the hook for $1 million minimum a year.
And will those dollars go into the capital improvement fund to the extent that there is excess dollars?
To the extent of the escalator, just the 15,000 as it increases. The $1 million will be tied to a series of bonds, likely will pay roughly $15 to $17 million of the debt over the 30-year period. Those will be a taxable series of bonds that will be paid from that rent.
Those dollars then become dollars that are owned by this authority?
Yes. They'll be held in a capital improvements fund held by the bond trustee, Ms. Madison, the same that those monies will be there to make sure that they are preserved for the purpose of maintaining capital improvements at the stadium.
Thank you.
So a few other important terms to note that if the lease, let's assume that they want to sell the team at some point. You do have a seat at the table. There are assignment provisions that give you approval rights. You've got MLB, this is a very big issue with them. They want the ability to basically also have a major seat at the table. And so that's something you may want to focus on when you get a draft. But basically, that could be an issue, hopefully, that, not expected, obviously, that'll happen anytime in the near-term future. As you all know, the team is also doing $16 million of tax increment financing, and so they are going to be really tied to this stadium through that tax increment financing, because they're not going to want to invest that amount of money and then quickly sell. Often I get asked about naming rights. Naming rights can be a big number. We don't know what that number is going to be. Could be $500,000, could be more, could be less. So located as this stadium is on the interstate, it's going to be a valuable thing to see your name across the stadium right there as you come around the bend. I was going to make a bad Alabama joke or something, but I'm not even going to go there. But sorry, a little bit of a UT fan, but they are,
Alabama.
yeah, so, are you Alabama?
I'm from Alabama.
Okay, I won't say it. I think so. I like Ms. Madison. Anyway, so they're valuable. We don't know how much of it they get those. I mean, as the Titans get theirs and most people negotiate it. You might say, why? Why don't we benefit from this? It's a taxable source of income that's indeterminate, and it would make us do a lot more taxable bonds at a higher interest rate. It also is a huge revenue source for them. Minor league teams are not some cash cow that throw off a ton of money. They do fine. I think Jason runs a good shop. I'm sure Rich would tell you that, but the naming rights is going to be a major reason they are able to borrow $16 million and contribute to this project, plus another $3 million of equity he's putting into the project. So this is a big number. It's something that and also the way naming rights work, and again, I want to make sure everybody understands this, is that if you sell naming rights, it's all part of a whole marketing relationship. They want a box, they want, they want tickets, they are your partner, and it really is not something, this body with all your talents is, you don't want to be out chumming with the naming rights guys on Friday nights, that's what they do, and so it really makes sense to align those interests, and my friends in Sevierville, and I did their financing of the stadium, that they're moving back to Knoxville from, they kept the naming rights, and in 25 years, I guess it's been, they've never sold them. And so, because it's just really hard unless you also control the boxes and things like that to do that. And they're great. I mean, they've tried hard, and that stadium's been a big success, but the naming rights, it's never been anything other than Smoky Stadium. And then there's MLB. When they created the whole concept of PDL, and I didn't really understand how big a change that was, and certainly the team can tell you more, but basically the creation of the professional development leagues, which were basically, they downsized the number of minor league teams. They basically created, the A, high A, and double A, triple A thing, and it's really, great to have a double A, team, which is, is super in this market, but they are much more interject themselves in these negotiations. They have to approve the lease, and they require some standard provisions, which I negotiated heavily with them in Knoxville. And I'd like to tell you I beat up on Major League Baseball, but I'm sure they would laugh at that because that's not true. But they're pretty tough. But I think what we've been able to negotiate with them is reasonable, and it really addresses, because of the needs to protect the players, and they're now unionized and they have a lot of requirements. They really need to have a lot of input on the way these stadiums operate. So you'll want to focus on that. Okay, that's the highlights. You'll see that. It's about a 60, 70-page document. I know you're excited to see that, but we'll get that to you as soon as we have a better draft ready. I'd hope to hand it to you today, but I want to go over some things with Jason first. Jermaine, do you have anything you want to add? Or no.
All right, update on the status of the donation agreement.
Well, and so Mark touched on the donation agreement. I think that we feel like we're pretty close to finalizing the donation agreement. Of course, the donation agreement will be for just the acreage that will be needed for the stadium. The site owners, Perimeter Properties or Foundry Master Owner, LLC, they will retain ownership of the property that they currently own around the stadium that will be redeveloped. And also redeveloped for private uses, which will generate the tax increment that we need. That land will also be used for parking, which hence is the reason for the parking agreements that will eventually come before this body. But we are still working feverishly on the donation agreement, and we anticipate that along with the lease, the donation agreement will come before you for your review and consideration in short order. Mark, is there anything else to add on the
No,
donation?
I'm sorry, I sort of jumped ahead on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Any other comments? All right, thank you, Jermaine.
Yes, sir.
Any other business we need to discuss?
I think that one
Annual
last
meeting.
item on there about your annual meeting.
meeting.
Yes, sir.
We just need to decide June or July, right?
Yes, sir. And y'all, at that annual meeting, get to elect officers and any other business that you need to do. But July, you need to have one annual meeting a year for the purpose of electing officers.
Okay. Any thoughts about this? I think June is probably the best month, don't you?
Fiscal year end being July 1.
Yes.
What? Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I do.
And you have reports that got to be sent to the state, signed by somebody here as the chair. So if that occurs, that would be good.
One question though, if the meeting is in June, it's prior to June 30, that annual meeting will not be, well, that's okay. This organization doesn't have much financials to report anyway. So.
Not this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more next year.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the only concern. You will not have June 30 financial information when you have the annual meeting, which is, or you wouldn't have a total years of operations before you have an annual meeting, but you're so close. And July is too late. So I concur.
June? So,
It
okay.
works for me.
Maria, you got a date on there or not?
It will be the June meeting,
Okay.
which this is the June meeting.
Today.
This is the June meeting. So that's the question, I guess. You want to elect officers then, I guess, at this point, and if you're going to do it at the June meeting.
It's convenient Rudolph's not here for the, since this is the June meeting, I guess we need to elect officers. Do we have any nominations?
I nominate
Yes.
the current slate of officers.
Your current slate at this point in time is Mr. Foster is your chair, Ms. Weeks is the secretary treasurer, and I guess Mr. Smith is the vice chair here. And his reason for being involved in this meeting.
Are there any term limitations that are out there that is,
No, ma'am.
okay.
Don't you have a nominee for chair? Oh, I thought,
Yes, I nominate Mr. Patterson to be our chair. And I apologize, I have not spoken with you about this.
I second that. If he doesn't decline, I second it.
All in favor, Mr. Patterson?
oh, did he accept?
We're gonna accept?
Okay, I'll accept.
There you go. I was waiting on his verbs.
Thank you.
All right, any other nominations?
You need a vice chair as well.
I'll nominate Daisy as vice chair. If you'll be my partner in this.
You put it like that.
Yeah, since I nominate, I second it, so I have to go for it. I will, but
All right. Any other nominations?
Did you get a second? Yeah.
Oh, a second on on Daisy being the vice chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Did we vote
deal.
for Patterson?
Any other nominations? I guess when you go to the secretary.
Secretary treasurer, or if you want to have a difference on that end of it. You can have two different positions if you wish.
You want it again?
I'll do it.
Good.
Okay.
She does a great job.
Yeah, she's the one that does a great job.
Well, yeah.
You do a
Yeah.
great job.
Maria,
What she's
Yeah,
Maria
thank
runs
you.
the whole show, that's for sure. All right, second on the, Miss Ann,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Good deal.
And did we approve Matt?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay.
did, yes.
All righty.
We have any other business or any other officers?
No, sir, that's all at this point.
If there's nothing else, we stand adjourned.